Welcome to What I Do Believe, a podcast about moving forward. If you've left old beliefs behind but are tired of constantly critiquing those who haven't, and you're ready to step into what's next, this podcast is for you. No drama, no hot takes, just an honest search for what's good, true, and worth believing. I'm Zach, a writer and spiritual director, and I'm glad you're here. Let's move forward together. So welcome back to the podcast. I really appreciate everybody who listened to the first episode. This podcast is really a exciting new endeavor for me. But I will be honest, it has been incredibly challenging, not just in prepping for this podcast, because kind of the theme of this show, what I do believe, it has grown out of what I think is going to be a theme or a focus in this current season of my life for I don't know how long, but this idea of focusing on what I do believe and letting go of criticisms of what I used to believe and the people who still believe that way. I feel drawn to this. I'm excited about it in my life and also in this podcast, but it's been incredibly challenging. Because for so many years, just that was my mindset. That was the way I thought. That was the way I communicated, was framing everything I had come to believe that I did think was good and beautiful and true and helpful and all of those things. I framed my beliefs against something. The setup for what I did believe was always, this is what I used to believe and here's how it's wrong. And now let's talk about what's right. And I have just spent so much time thinking that way, talking that way, teaching that way, that it has been very challenging to step away from that. Very, very challenging, very hard. I have to really think extra hard about everything I'm going to say so as to not frame it in that way. But it's been challenging in the good sense. Challenging in that I wasn't expecting it to be so hard, but I'm enjoying the challenge and excited that I get to bring all of you wonderful listeners along with me. So definitely be patient with me, as I'm probably going to slide back into old habits from time to time in this podcast and accidentally, slide back into talking about what I don't believe anymore or criticisms, but I'm going to give it my best shot and continue to move forward, not giving myself too much of a hard time. So I hope you'll do the same. And on the whole, I do believe this is the way to go. Today, what I want to talk about is something that has completely reshaped how I move through the world. And that is, I do believe that God is already here. God is already here, everywhere, in everything and in everyone. Faith for me isn't about bringing God to people. It is about noticing where God already is. It's about recognizing, naming, and learning from the divine presence that has been there all along. And recognizing it, becoming aware of it, and then participating with it and joining in. I really think that what we mean when we say, I want to grow closer to God, we definitely don't mean that literally. And I mean that even less literally now than I ever have, because I don't think there is this distance between us and God. I think God is here. God is close. God is closer to us than we are to ourselves. God is in everything. God is in the space in between the cells in my body. God is in the space in between the different atoms that make up those cells. God is in the space in between the different particles of each atom. So there is no literally growing closer to God. But when we say that, what I mean by that now is not literally getting closer to God, but growing in my awareness of God's closeness. That's what it is for me now. It's not actually growing closer. It's growing a greater awareness of God's closeness, growing in greater awareness of how close God already is. And the more aware I become of that, the more I can cooperate with it, the more I can participate in it. And the more I do that, the more I can experience it. And the more I experience it, the more I enjoy it, the more it shapes my reality, the more it's not just something I choose to believe in, but it's something that I experience in my everyday life, in my life and the lives of people around me, no matter where I go. So this shift has really changed a lot of things for me. And I can't say that I'm practicing this perfectly, but the more I do grow in that awareness, the more it shapes every single day of my life and helps me to live at more peace and enjoyment and in the present moment, because that's where God is. God is here. And so I'm not trying to bring God to people. My new posture is simply looking for where God is everywhere and being open to the possibility that I'll find God everywhere. And definitely letting go of any assumptions that God is not here, God's not there, God's not with that person, God's not a part of that person's life. In fact, I want to do the opposite of that and assume that God is already everywhere and a part of everybody's life, regardless of how aware of it they seem to be or not, and regardless of how much they are participating and cooperating with it or not. I think there's a very big difference between God being in somebody's life and maybe they aren't aware of it, so they're not cooperating, or maybe they're actively working against it. That can be true. But there's a difference between that and somebody who is aware, growing in awareness, and cooperating with it more and more fully to their benefit. So it's not about God being close or far. It's really all about how aware of God's closeness are we. A few years ago, I was given the book to read called The Art of Communicating by Thich Nhat Hanh. This is not a Christian book. It's not a theological book. It is actually a book written by a Zen Buddhist monk. And it is a book about how to listen well to other people, to listen to yourself, to be present with other people, to be present with yourself, and to speak to yourself and to other people in ways that heals instead of harms. And it's one of the first times that I actively engaged in a book not from the Christian tradition, maybe from a competing religious tradition, and went into it with open-mindedness and went into it hopeful to experience some wisdom, some insight, some truth from it. And as I was reading it, that's exactly what happened. Because what the book is describing, this concept of being fully awake, fully present, fully mindful of yourself, of your words, of your relationships, it was just connecting with me in a way that, just as I'm reading, I'm saying, like, this is true. This is true. This resonates. It moves me. I felt God in the wisdom that it was sharing. And I've just come to believe that if something is true, then God is in that. If something is true, then it belongs to God. All truth is God's truth. I was taught to assume in other points in life that something was wrong or dangerous just because it wasn't explicitly Christian. I think that we really make a mistake when we say that there is only truth or wisdom to be found in something that is explicitly Christian, or that explicitly has a Christian label on it, or is found from within that tradition. If we believe that God created all things and the image of God is in all people, then I think we can expect to find truth and wisdom in all people, in all places, in all things. I do not believe, well, let me rephrase that. I do believe that wisdom and truth and love that these things are not owned by any one religion. I think these things express themselves all over humanity and are reflections of something deeper. And I now do expect to find glimpses of God in the unexpected places. Perhaps in previous seasons of life, rather than receiving the wisdom from Thich Nhat Hanh, I would have been thinking, okay, how can I convert him? How can I convert him to Christianity? And yeah, that's not my concern anymore. I think I'm more interested in assuming that God is already present in everyone and everywhere than trying to think that it's my job to bring him to people, places, and things. I am looking for God everywhere, even in unexpected places. And by unexpected, I don't just mean places that I have assumed God is not, but just I'm open to being surprised. I'm open to, at least I'm trying to be open. I'm working towards being open to seeing God in ways that I didn't expect, in ways and people that maybe challenge my prejudices, that challenge my biases, that challenge my preconceived notions, not just in people who think like me, not just in traditions that I'm very familiar with or that I'm comfortable with, but in different cultures and different belief systems and in different ways of seeing the world. And now I'm not looking for the Christian label anymore. I'm not super concerned with that anymore. I'm just, in every person, every place, everything, every insight, every experience, my discernment question now is not, is this Christian? And my discernment question is this true? Is this true? Does this reflect love? Does this bring life? Does this reflect kindness and compassion and peace? And if the answer is yes to those questions, to me, that's what it means that God is in something. Not is it Christian, but is it true? Does it lead me towards faith, hope, love, life, goodness, beauty? Those are the questions that are worth asking. And the more I read the story of Jesus, the more I begin to get the sense that it's kind of how Jesus saw people and engaged with people too. I don't see Jesus treating people like projects. Even in the way he preached in his pronouncement of the gospel, I don't see him going around necessarily saying anything that would indicate he was bringing God to a place where God was not already present. I see Jesus saying, hey, the kingdom of God is at hand. It's already here, right now in front of you. There is no distance to move across. God is here. Now repent and believe the good news. In other words, God's already here. Rethink everything so you can cooperate with it and live in participation in it. And the more you participate, the more you experience, the more you benefit. I think about stories and characters like Zacchaeus, who was this tax collector, this outsider. And, Jesus didn't say, hey, let me show you how to find God. He looked up and he essentially said, like, I see you. Let's have dinner. I see you. Let's have dinner. Let's be together. And that simple act of seeing Zacchaeus for who he already was, I think that's what changed everything. It was just, I see you. We're going to have dinner. Or I think this is a crazy story that maybe gets overlooked sometimes, but Jesus has this encounter with a Roman centurion, a Gentile, a pagan, someone who did not worship the God of Israel, someone who probably worshipped lots of other gods that would be seen as demonic in opposition to the God of Israel. But when Jesus encounters him, he doesn't convert him. He sees the faith that this guy already has, right? He says, I haven't seen faith like this anywhere else in Israel. So he names the strengths that he already sees much rather than, calling out any weaknesses or any areas that might need to change. So anyways, the point being, I think over and over again, Jesus is not nearly as much trying to convert people as Christians might be. I think he's pointing to what is already true about people. I think that's what it means to believe that the kingdom of God is at hand. It's to be looking for where God's life, God's presence, God's kingdom has already been planted and has already taken root. And that's what Jesus does. He points to what's already true about people. He names the faith that's already there. He names the hope that's already there, the love that's already there. Okay, and that brings me to Matthew chapter 25. Yeah, Matthew 25. This is a parable that Jesus tells that I have spent a lot of time over the last couple of years meditating on, because when you really look at it, it's pretty crazy. I think sometimes it does get oversimplified to be just this parable about judgment and so essentially Jesus tells a story where, people are standing before him at the end of time, at the end of all things. And the short version is when Jesus says to them, when you fed the hungry, when you clothed the naked, when you welcomed the stranger, that was me. You were doing that for me. And what I think is fascinating about this story is that everybody's response to this is confusion. Nobody says, oh yeah, we knew that, Jesus, we knew that. Everybody's confused, right? One group says, wait, when did we do that? When did we see you? What are you talking about, Jesus? I have no idea what you're talking about. When did we do all these things for you? And Jesus says, you've already done these things, right? You've done these things for me. You just didn't realize it. And they're surprised, right? They had interacted with Jesus and they didn't know it, right? And then there's the flip side. The people who thought they knew Jesus, maybe, who were sure they were doing everything right, believing the right things, all that stuff. And then Jesus says, when you failed to do it to the least of these, you failed to do it to me, right? Jesus says, I was right in front of you and you ignored me. And I mean, really meditating on this should hit hard, because I think what Jesus is saying is the opposite of the mindset that we can fall into if we're not careful. Jesus isn't saying, go out and bring me to people. He's saying, go out and find me in people. He isn't saying, go out and bring me to people. He's saying, go out and find me in people. Not trying to save people, not trying to fix people. Just go out and learn to see me in people, especially in people that you might overlook, that you might not expect. And then when you interact with people like that, with kindness, with love, compassion, with generosity, you're interacting with me that way. And according to the parable, there are going to be a lot of people who have been interacting with Jesus their whole life, and maybe they didn't know it, who have been serving Jesus, been helping Jesus, loving Jesus, giving to him, being kind, compassionate to Jesus. They're having a relationship with Jesus, and maybe having no idea that that's what they're doing. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just my spin on it. Maybe that's my take on it. But thinking of this parable in this way really has me, just wanting to let go of the notion that I need to, take God anywhere. Just be open to that God is already everywhere. Not bringing Jesus, but looking for Jesus. And I think a lot of people might be doing that, even if they're not Christian. A lot of people are loving Jesus and serving Jesus, perhaps, even if they've never heard about Jesus or have maybe understandably rejected Christianity because of a lot of the hypocrisy and stuff like that that's going on in deconstruction right now. Maybe people of different faiths I wonder if it's possible if people of different religions actually interact with Jesus more regularly than Christians do, because their faith leads them to be out treating the least of these with kindness, compassion, generosity, service. And I mean, if that's what it means to serve Jesus, then yeah, there's definitely a lot of people who aren't Christians who are loving Jesus and spending more time with Jesus than the so-called Christians are. So anyways, I'm not saying I know all that for certain. I just think that's a really compelling way to think about it, and it is shaping a lot of how I think about what it means to be a person of faith going forward. So, and it's just how I want to live. I want to walk through life with anticipation, with excitement, expecting to see God everywhere. I want to name it when I see it. I want to celebrate it. I want to learn from it, and I want to join in, because God is already here. And it's not our job to bring God anywhere. All I want to do going forward is just look for where God is already present in the lives of other people and join in where I can join in. Fan the flame that's already there. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to What I Do Believe. This podcast is an Aramos production, nonprofit creating space for reflection, spiritual growth, and honest conversation about faith and life. Music featured in this podcast is by Ivan L. Sazar, the Symbology Cinematics YouTube channel. This episode resonated with you? Consider subscribing, sharing it with a friend, and leaving a review in your podcast player of choice. It helps more people find the show. Want to connect? Visit aramosnashville.com or join our online community at aramos.community, where people from all backgrounds come together to explore faith, doubt, and everything in between. And if you'd like to support the show or Aramos and the work we're doing, you can donate at aramosnashville.com/donate. Every bit helps us continue creating spaces for real conversations and deeper connections. Wherever you are on the journey, keep moving forward to what's good, true, and full of life. I'm Zach, and I'll see you next time.